My wife demanded an open marriage, now she can't handle the consequences. I, Zach 42M, and my wife, Karen 37. We've been married for 15 years and have gone through all the typical ups and downs, raising kids, paying mortgages, managing careers. But about a year ago things started to change. Karen started dressing differently, paying more attention to her looks, and seemed more focused on the gym than ever before. At first, I figured it was a phase. I thought she was just feeling a bit restless, and maybe she wanted a change for herself. But soon enough, I realized this shift wasn't just about self-care. It was about our new neighbor, Rick. Rick moved in 2 houses down. He's 34, divorced, and doesn't exactly hide his single and ready to mingle attitude. Karen would casually mention him in conversation more often than she'd mention our friends or even our own family. She'd laugh a little louder if he was around, adjust her hair, or offer to bring him food if he looked like he was struggling with something around his yard. Then one night after a few glasses of wine, Karen sat me down for a talk. And that was when she told me she wanted to open up our marriage. I was shocked. I thought we were doing okay, but she hit me with reasons that I hadn't seen coming. "You've gotten predictable, you know," she said, not looking me in the eye. "I want to feel alive again, to feel that rush of excitement. I think an open marriage could give us both the freedom to explore other people and bring some of that energy back to each other." As much as it hurt to hear, I listened. Maybe she was right. Over the years, we'd fallen into a routine. Sex had become part of the schedule, like doing the dishes or taking out the trash. Karen mentioned how we'd become just parents, or just providers, and how she craved excitement. And even though I wasn't totally on board with the idea, she was insistent. I think part of me wanted to prove that I could still be exciting. I wanted to show her that I was willing to do anything to keep our relationship strong, even if it meant bending my own beliefs. So reluctantly, I agreed to try an open marriage. What happened next was not something I was ready for. Karen wasted no time. Within a week, I saw Rick hanging around more than usual. He'd come over for help with minor things like lifting boxes or accidentally borrowing the wrong tool. She'd go over to his place with excuses as thin as paper. And the few times I brought it up, she brushed me off saying, "Oh, we're just friends," with a smirk that told me more than I wanted to know. Then one night, Karen didn't come home until nearly 1 a.m. She'd been out with Rick, and she came back looking happier than I'd seen her in a long time. She even made some offhand comment about how exhilarating it was to finally be with someone who knew how to keep things interesting. That was a low blow. I won't lie, it stung like hell. I began to wonder if this was what she'd wanted all along, an excuse to see Rick, without the guilt. Yet, I'd agreed to this arrangement. I knew it would be hypocritical to back out now, especially after I'd told her I was okay with trying. So I decided to start seeing what my options looked like too. It felt odd, almost juvenile, creating dating profiles and trying to strike up conversations with people I'd never met. To my surprise, I didn't lack for attention. Being married and taken seemed to give me an air of mystery. I was shocked at how much interest I received. Within a few days, I found myself messaging back and forth with a woman named Lisa. She was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly understanding of my situation. We connected over coffee and it felt refreshing. There were no expectations, no pressure, just two people talking about life, sharing stories, and enjoying each other's company. A few weeks later, things with Lisa escalated, and I found myself genuinely enjoying her company, far more than I'd anticipated. Suddenly, this open marriage didn't feel like a burden or a compromise, it felt like something I was doing for myself. Karen started noticing the shift. I'd come home with a slight grin, or I'd check my phone more often, and she started asking questions. "What's got you smiling like that?" she'd say, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "Oh, nothing much," I'd reply, knowing that was only half true. What started as a defensive move on my end had somehow transformed into something else. And, unexpectedly, Karen seemed to be bothered by it. Seeing her initial excitement fade gave me a strange mix of satisfaction and confusion. This was her idea, after all. And now that I was actually enjoying myself, she didn't seem too thrilled. After my dates with Lisa, something shifted, not just in my life, but in Karen's behavior. This open marriage had initially been Karen's way of injecting excitement back into her life. She'd seemed almost euphoric about the possibilities, diving headfirst into her thing with Rick, while I fumbled through dating apps, wondering how I'd even start. Yet here I was, a couple of weeks into my connection with Lisa, genuinely looking forward to our conversations and feeling more energized than I had in years. And Karen noticed. The little moments, like when I'd come home late, laughing about something Lisa had said, or when I'd absent-mindedly smile at a text while Karen was in the same room, seemed to unsettle her. At first, she tried to play it cool, brushing off my newfound happiness with comments like, "So, looks like someone's finally having fun." But the slight edge in her voice didn't go unnoticed. And slowly, her casual remarks morphed into something less subtle. "You're really getting into this, huh?" she said one evening as I was getting ready to go out. "Just enjoying it like you said we should," I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. The jealousy became clearer as time went on. Karen had no problem flaunting her thing with Rick, yet here she was, uncomfortable seeing me enjoy myself. She would ask pointed questions like, "What does she have that I don't?" Or, "Do you think about her when you're with me?" It was as if she needed reassurance that she was still the most important person in my life, even though she'd actively pushed me to seek someone else. One evening, Karen came home from Rick's, but instead of her usual energetic self, she seemed quiet and distracted. We were sitting in the living room when she finally spoke up. "I don't understand why you're so happy with her," she said, almost whispering. "What do you mean?" I asked, taken aback. "I thought we were doing this to add excitement, to bring us closer, you know? But instead, it feels like you're drifting away. You never used to look at me like that. Like, you're genuinely happy." This was the first time I'd seen a crack in Karen's confidence since she'd proposed the open marriage. The self-assured, adventurous woman who'd laughed in my face about my so-called predictable nature was now sitting across from me, looking vulnerable. "Karen, this was your idea," I reminded her gently. "You said you wanted excitement, remember? But now that I'm actually finding it, you're acting like it's a problem." She sighed, and for the first time in months we talked, really talked. She admitted that she'd expected me to feel left out or even jealous, hoping that it would push me to try harder in our marriage. She'd never imagined I'd actually connect with someone else, and seeing me enjoy Lisa's company was forcing her to confront feelings she didn't expect. At that moment it dawned on me. Karen had wanted the excitement of the open marriage, but only if she held the reins. It had always been about her. Her desire for attention. Her need to feel desired. Her yearning for something different. She hadn't anticipated that I would take her challenge and find something meaningful on my own terms. Over the next few weeks, her behavior changed even more. Karen became increasingly competitive, as if trying to outshine my relationship with Lisa. She'd dress up more, ask me to go out with her spontaneously, and try to plan romantic nights. Part of me wanted to respond, to rekindle something that had been lost, but it was hard to ignore the fact that her actions were driven by jealousy rather than genuine love or care. One day, after I came home from a particularly memorable evening with Lisa, Karen confronted me. This time, it wasn't subtle. "This whole thing," she said, gesturing between us, "isn't what I thought it would be. You're different now." "What did you expect, Karen?" I replied, my patience thinning. "You're the one who wanted an open marriage. You're the one who told me to go have fun. So that's what I'm doing." She looked at me, her eyes almost pleading. "I thought it would make us stronger. I thought you'd see what you were missing and come back to me, but it's like you've moved on." Moved on. That phrase echoed in my head and I realized, to some extent, it was true. My time with Lisa had reminded me of the man I used to be. Someone who was easygoing, adventurous, and genuinely happy. I wasn't that man with Karen anymore, and maybe I hadn't been for a long time. "I haven't moved on," I said, trying to keep my tone gentle. "But I'm not willing to go back to feeling like an afterthought, Karen. You wanted something new and now you're upset because I found it too." Our conversation ended there, but the silence that followed spoke volumes. Karen didn't go to Rick's as often after that, and on the nights she did, she didn't come home glowing the way she used to. Meanwhile, my relationship with Lisa continued to grow. I was careful, of course, not to rush things or let it interfere with my responsibilities, but I couldn't deny that I was happier than I'd been in years. Finally, one night as we were having dinner, Karen put down her fork, took a deep breath and said, "I think I made a mistake." It was the first time she'd admitted any regret. She looked at me with a mix of sadness and frustration, like she was grappling with her own choices and the consequences they'd brought. "This open marriage, it's tearing us apart. I don't want to lose you," she said, her voice wavering. Hearing those words should have made me feel relieved, but instead I felt conflicted. Part of me had waited to hear this from Karen for months, to know that she still cared about our relationship. But another part of me couldn't forget how quickly she disregarded me the moment a more exciting option had come along. Things continued to unravel in ways I hadn't anticipated. After Karen admitted she'd made a mistake, I thought we might be able to find common ground and start working toward a resolution. But I was wrong. Rather than addressing the core issues, she chose a different approach: control. It started subtly. Karen would make comments like, "I think the kids are noticing things are different between us," or, "Do you really think this new lifestyle is good for our family?" There was a heaviness in her tone, one that made her words feel like more than just passing comments. But the real turning point came one evening when we were alone after putting the kids to bed. I just finished cleaning up the kitchen when Karen appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed and a familiar fire in her eyes. I knew immediately that something was coming, and the look on her face sent a chill down my spine. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm. "All right," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, clearly trying to contain her frustration. "This thing you have going on with Lisa needs to end." I sighed, sensing where this conversation was heading. "Karen, we agreed to an open marriage. You wanted this arrangement, and now that I've found someone who makes me happy, you're telling me to end it." Her jaw tightened. "It was supposed to make our marriage stronger, not give you an excuse to replace me. I wanted us to grow together, not for you to go off and find someone else." She looked away, almost as if the admission was painful for her. "And now I'm giving you a choice. End it or I'm filing for divorce." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Divorce. After everything we'd been through, she was willing to throw it all away because I was following the very rules she'd set. I felt a surge of anger mixed with disbelief. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly, my voice filled with the frustration I'd tried to suppress. "You wanted to have an open marriage to feel alive again. And now that I'm actually happy, You're ready to end our marriage if I don't give up the one good thing I've found. Her face hardened. Yes, if that's what it takes. I want my husband back. I don't want to compete with some stranger for your attention. It was almost laughable. She'd pushed me to the sidelines when Rick was all she could think about, and now she expected me to drop everything because she'd decided she wanted me back. What about the kids? I asked, my tone calm but my hands clenched. Are you willing to tear our family apart because you don't like the way things have turned out? Her expression shifted and a coldness settled over her. Oh, don't worry about the kids. If we divorce, they'll be with me, and believe me, they'll know exactly why their father chose some random woman over their own mother. The threat was crystal clear. She wasn't just talking about divorce, she was prepared to turn our children against me, to paint me as the villain if I didn't bend to her demands. I felt a pit form in my stomach. My mind raced, thinking about my kids, about how I'd always tried to be a good father to them. The idea of them resenting me, or worse, seeing me as some sort of monster, was unbearable. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. She'd thrown down an ultimatum, one that she knew would hit me where it hurt the most. You're really willing to go that far? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Her gaze didn't waver. I need you to make a choice now. Her or us? In that moment, I realized Karen was no longer interested in fixing our marriage. She was interested in control. She wanted the satisfaction of knowing that she held power over me, that I would do whatever she wanted if it meant protecting my relationship with my kids. I thought back to the man I'd become over the past few months, the version of myself that I'd rediscovered through my time with Lisa. I'd felt alive, happy, and most importantly, free. Free from the years of feeling inadequate, free from constantly having to measure up to an impossible standard. But as I looked at Karen, I knew that my happiness was a threat to her sense of control, and she wasn't willing to let it continue. Taking a deep breath, I stood up straight, meeting her gaze. Karen, I won't let you use our children as pawns to control me. If you want a divorce, we'll go through it, but I'll fight for my relationship with them. She laughed bitterly. You think a court is going to side with you? You've been seeing another woman. I'll make sure they know exactly what kind of family man you are. I could feel my pulse pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. Karen, you're not the only one who can tell a story. I've respected you, gone along with this because I thought it would make you happy, but I won't be bullied. If you want a war, you'll get one. For the first time, she looked unsure, as though she hadn't expected me to stand my ground. She'd always been the one calling the shots, and I'd always been the one bending, trying to keep the peace. But that chapter was over. In the days that followed, Karen's threats intensified. She began dropping hints to the kids, subtly painting me as a bad guy without saying it outright. But I kept my distance from the conflict, refusing to engage with her manipulations in front of them. I reached out to a lawyer, someone experienced in family law, and began preparing for what I knew would be a difficult fight. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I was certain of one thing. I wasn't going to let Karen tear me down because she couldn't handle the consequences of her own choices. Meanwhile, I kept my relationship with Lisa on hold. I explained the situation, and she understood, offering me her support without pressure. Knowing she was there for me, even if only in the background, gave me the strength to keep going. As time passed, Karen's threats lost their sting. Our children could see that I was still there for them, that I hadn't abandoned them. And while the road ahead was far from easy, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. I was no longer the man Karen could mold and manipulate. I was standing up for myself, for my happiness, and for my right to be a part of my children's lives. In the end, Karen's ultimatums had only served to remind me of the power I'd had all along, the power to choose my own path, to build my own happiness and to reclaim my life. Update. It's been 6 months since Karen's ultimatum and our intense standoff, and a lot has changed. Our divorce is officially underway. Once Karen realized I wasn't backing down, she began throwing everything she could into the process, trying to gain full custody and painting me as the villain. At first, her strategy rattled me. The thought of my kids seeing me as anything other than a loving father kept me up at night. But with the help of my lawyer and support from people who truly knew me, I found a way to push through. I gathered evidence, texts, emails, even old messages where Karen proposed the open marriage. My lawyer made it clear that her desire to open the relationship was documented and that her accusations about my affair were baseless. The court saw through her narrative and recognized my commitment to my children. In the end, we settled on shared custody, and while it isn't ideal, I'm grateful for the time I still get to spend with them. The kids have adjusted better than I expected. I was terrified they'd resent me, but over time, they've seen that I'm still here for them. I make sure our time together is meaningful, and I've been open with them in an age-appropriate way, letting them know I love them and will always be there, no matter what. As for Karen, she's moved on in her own way. Her relationship with Rick didn't survive the fallout. Once she no longer had the control she'd been used to, cracks started to show, and they broke things off a couple of months ago. I wish her no ill will, but I've learned that her happiness, or lack thereof, isn't my responsibility. And Lisa? We're still seeing each other, carefully and at our own pace. She's been my rock through this whole mess, but we're also giving each other space to heal. I'm focusing on rebuilding my life, not rushing into anything serious, just enjoying the companionship of someone who genuinely cares for me. Life is quieter now, simpler. I never expected that standing up for myself would lead to so much peace, but it has. For the first time in years, I feel free from manipulation, free from doubt, And free to be myself. Looking forward, I'm embracing this new chapter with gratitude, ready to be the father my kids deserve and the man I've worked so hard to become. It's been a long road, but I'm finally moving forward and I wouldn't change a thing.